Hey guys, Sandro here from Carcraft Auto Detailing in Melbourne. Today's video is quite an in-depth look at a start to finish full correction and coating protection detail on this black 2017 Audi S3 sedan, but with a lot more to it. I've really tried to pack as much information into this video as possible in the way of techniques, method, results and product information. So I do really hope the hard work that went into making this video does provide you with some useful insights. I'll also throw in an apology for some of the shaky footage, as most of this video was shot on a head cam, which was geared around allowing you to get a more candid look from my perspective of what I see and experience during this whole process. And just before I get to talking you through this 4-day detailing journey on the Audi S3, I just want to fill you in on a couple of things. Firstly, this is a colleague's car rather than a customer's car. And besides obviously correcting and protecting the paint, the main focus of this detail and many more I've done in the past and will be doing in the future are mainly focused on testing detailing products and techniques, from wash and decontamination products and processes, to compounds, pads, machines, protective sealants and coatings, and really everything and anything in between. Now, test panels are great to trial and experiment with products and techniques, but they'll never replace the information and knowledge you get from working on an actual car. So it's quite important in my world to have my own cars, as well as cars from colleagues, friends and family, where I can dedicate some time to more extensive testing and gather information that just isn't possible, cost effective or appropriate to do on customers' cars. And from the viewpoint of this video, it's all about sharing this ever expanding growth for knowledge that is a massive part of my detailing lifestyle. So although sometimes I tell you that I've been testing and trialing new products and techniques, this is me sharing some of that experience with you and allowing you to see how I come up with these conclusions, which again I do really hope you appreciate and find useful. I'm also going to try and update you guys on some of these details in the future, and there may also be some slightly more outrageous or left field experimental details coming up. This facility I'm working from will also hopefully be going through a bit of an upgrade soon to get it to a more professional detailing studio setup that I'll be working on as well. Also, there has been and will be a continuation of detailing training clinics and classes, as well as some professional coating authorization programs which I'll be teaching here as well. Now, during this particular detail and possibly others in the future, not every product, tool, technique and method I use is necessarily what I consider to be my normal process or choice of product, but certainly much of it will be. And although there's really no limitations on the products and tools I'll be testing, there are a few that are still in their beta or trial stages of development. So to be respectful to the various manufacturers and honour their wishes, I can't reveal those particular products just yet, but I can certainly still share their testing process. And lastly, I just want to make clear that this is just one piece of the testing and trialing phase of truly evaluating a product. So just because a product might work amazingly or terribly here, it is by no means a fair or just way to draw a conclusion. But if 1, 2 or 3 of these products just keep on performing great time after time on various cars, paint types and situations, you can then begin to draw your conclusions that they are great products. So let me try and catch up to the footage so far and run through the process and products used. I started with the rims, giving them a pre-treatment with CONCOURS Purge. This is a wheel cleaner that, much like specific iron removal chemicals, treats metal or brake dust particles, but it goes a little beyond that to also deal with certain traffic or road dirt and grime buildup. But where it really seems to shine in my experience is in the great balance this product seems to find in effective, easy cleaning, yet not being overly aggressive like many other wheel cleaners, and so far actually not affecting the coatings I've applied to the rims. And I have to also add that it's by far the least offensive iron removal chemical I've ever used, and actually doesn't smell all that bad, which is a first for me. So after a couple of minutes of letting it dwell, it's pressure rinsed off with a good 90 to 95% of the brake dust and grime along with it. Now, as the rims will be coated later on, I'll be following up with my cleaning brushes to get that last 5 to 10% of the grime off them in preparation. For the tyres and wheel wells, I use POORBOY'S APC and degreaser, as in those particular areas, degreasers do simply work better. And the POORBOY'S is one that is really fantastic and impressive. Then using a variety of wheel brushes and mitts, and reapplying purge, each rim is given a thorough clean and rinse off. Next is the pre-soak foam using Snow Plus. Over the past year, I've used and tested this detergent to its limits, and it's really become my go-to decontamination wash product for the simple reason that it works fantastic and has great adaptability. So if the car is really dirty and caked in mud and grime, you can up your concentration of product to make use of its greater cleaning and stripping ability without having the issues of excessive residue buildup like many other products. Whereas if you wish to give the paint just a light decon wash to simply top up a wax or sealant, then you can use it at a much lighter concentration for that purpose. It foams and clings to the paint about as good as anything I've used in the past, gives you amazing lubrication without the use of interfering polymers, and provides great lubrication and an effortless rinse off without the use of rinsing agents in its chemistry. And the same goes for using it in your wash buckets, where you can up or lower the concentration of product to suit your needs and condition of the paint. And for those of you who use the spray bottle method to apply your detergent, you can again up or lower the standard 1:10 dilution ratio within reason to respond to your needs without having to deal with the residue issues or lack of lubrication and cleaning power. Once the car is rinsed down, the next stage is both the chemical and mechanical decontamination stages in one. For this, I use CONCOURS Purify, which some of you may have seen in my past videos. Basically, it's an iron fallout remover with some added traffic film stripping agents, also capable of breaking down waxes and sealants, and containing lubricating surfactants that allow you to safely, quickly, and effectively both chemically strip and with the use of a clay bar or mitt, also mechanically clay the paint. Now Purify itself has had its formula recently updated, which has given it more lubrication for the claying stage and an easier rinse off to make it even more user friendly. Now the clay mitt I'm actually using is still a prototype, so I can't give you a brand name or link, but so far I gotta say that it's one of the few I've used that seems to be far more gentle on the paint than your standard clay mitts or towels, yet really effective and speedy in its results. You can actually really feel the bonded contaminants through the touch as you use it, and it's actually a great way of judging when the paint is contamination free. So all in all, Purify with the clay mitts is working exceptionally well and saving me a good half hour on most decontamination stages of cars, which makes it an extremely efficient product and reduces the cost and need for further stages and products. Now, if you break the car up into several sections and rinse as you go after each application of Purify and claying, you can generally move on to drying the car once you're done. But if it's a little hotter and you're seeing residue build up, like you would when using iron and tar removal chemicals, you can give the car another quick foam or hand wash before your final rinse down to address any remaining residue. But as I always do an IPA or alcohol-based wipe down as the final decontamination treatment, it'll generally address any minor remaining residue at that stage. Now the car was given a quick pat down dry with a microfiber drying towel, and then all the seams and crevices were blown out with compressed air before using Clarity as the alcohol or IPA final wipe down in preparation for the next correction stage. One thing I'll add about doing your IPA wipe down is to be generous with the product, as it not only increases lubrication and reduces the chance of scratches, but also more importantly, it helps the product break down and remove any standing residue, which will negatively affect the paint correction stage. And use a few microfiber cloths, turn and fold them over frequently, and really ensure you're treating every inch of the car, rather than just spending 5 minutes doing a quick rush job that really doesn't effectively prepare the paint. Next, I like to have a really good look at the paint with my handheld defect spotting light and see what I'm going to have to address in the way of paint defects. So even though this car is only a few months old, I'm seeing some nicely bonded overspray that didn't even budge during the decontamination stage. There's an even coat of wash-induced swirls, quite a few water and bird poo etchings, some of which look quite severe, and some definite rotary-induced holograms, and a fair bit of rids or random isolated deeper scratches and scuffs. So now that I've got an idea of what I need to address, I'll usually move on to taping up the vehicle to set up my test area and then mask the surrounding plastic and rubber trims to obviously protect them and my polishing pads from picking up unwanted residue and cross-contamination. With all that done, it's time to measure the existing paint. Now, being a fairly new European car, I would expect some pretty decent paint thickness readings, but I never like to assume, so spending 5 minutes going around the car and taking a few dozen readings is a great way to confirm that, and to ensure that there is no massive variations in the readings that would suggest certain panels have been repaired or resprayed. So with an average and consistent reading of about 5 mils or roughly 125 microns, these readings are what I would expect from this car and nothing seems to be out of place, which is good news to proceed in the way of paint correction. So on to the testing phase of discovering what combinations of compounds, polishes, pads and techniques is going to give the best results on this paint type in the most productive and time efficient manner. Now, like I said earlier, this detail is geared around testing products and techniques. So my normal section test is going to be quite a bit more elaborate here. And although I won't be displaying every single test I perform on the various panels on this car, as this is already quite a long video, I will be trying to talk you through what my testing has revealed so far. I'll also add that with each of these compounds, quite a few separate tests on this paint type were done to see how they respond to things like longer and shorter working times, more or less pressure, larger and smaller sections, using more or less product, and with a selection of foam and microfiber pads. So this first compound is another prototype from a very reputable company that I was actually really excited to test. I started with the SCHOLL Concepts Orange Eco Fix Polishing Pad, which I've been playing around with quite a bit lately. As far as the user experience, there was quite a bit of dusting, and the wipe off was more difficult than I'd like it to be. Looking at the paint, the lighter defects of the swirls and holograms and lighter water spots have pretty much been eliminated, though a few slightly deeper reds still remain. And the clarity of the finish is quite poor, with significant haze and micro marring. So after another set of passes, working a much smaller section, the remaining defects were all pretty much eliminated with ease. However, even after a little variance in my technique and further testing with this combination, I couldn't address the poor finish or issues with dusting and the difficult wipe off. So as a direct comparison, I used CARPRO ClearCut using the same pad and playing around with the same variants of techniques. What I found overall was a better user experience with slightly less dusting, but a much easier wipe off. In the way of defect removal, however, the results were quite similar, as was the haze and micro marring left on the finish, though a slight advantage was seen by ClearCut on both fronts of cut and finish. Now to discuss a little about what I've discovered about the SCHOLL Orange EcoFix foam pads, is that they seem to work quite well with medium or one-step compounds and finishing polishes on hard to medium paints. However, with your heavier cutting compounds, they do seem to overly dust and sometimes struggle to break down those heavier diminishing abrasives, which can lead to hard wipe-offs and a poor finish. So my next step was to try both these compounds again with the Lake Country foam cutting HDO pads, which incidentally are in my opinion one of the best closed cell foam cutting pads on the market today. So with the prototype compound, I immediately saw a massive improvement with little to no dusting and a very easy clean wipe off. And when I used it with ClearCut, the blue HCO pad once again produced very little dusting and an easy wipe off. And I'll also add that where the previous SCHOLL pad seemed to absorb more of the compounds, the Lake Country HDO seemed to release and keep the product working on the panel far more effectively. So as a third compound thrown into the mix, I used CONCOURS Precision once again on the same blue HDO pad, and yet again the user experience and workability was spot on with great ease. So to have a look at the actual results, I was quite happy with the level of defect removal on all three sections, with a good 95% plus elimination of all defects in just one set of passes. However, when looking at the clarity of finish, there was a massive difference in all three sections. Quite surprisingly, although the prototype compound achieved more cut with the blue HDO pad, the finish was extremely poor and significantly hazed and marred. Whereas with ClearCut, the cut and the finish was a definite improvement on all fronts, though some light haze was still quite evident. And looking at the third section with CONCOURS Precision, the cut and finish is just really amazing after just one set of passes. Now all three compounds were given some further testing to try and use technique to address the finish, as well as to increase cut as close to 100% of defect removal as possible. But in the end, although I was able to slightly improve both cut and finish, the initial results I got with the first set of passes still stayed true with no significant altering results. So basically at this stage, with the blue HDO pad, it seems that one or two at most sets of passes will address the level of defect removal quite well with any of these compounds. However, as far as finish goes, the only compound that could be used as a one-step correction on this paint is Precision, as the other two just aren't producing enough clarity in their finish. So on to some further testing. At this stage, I'm really happy with how the Lake Country Blue H2O pads are performing on this paint. So I want to try them with some more compounds to see what else I can discover on this product testing detail. Next up is Vision Heavy Cut Compound by Detailing Kingdom. Firstly, I have to say that this compound is like using butter on your pad. It's just so super smooth and creamy and just glides amazingly along the panel. The wipe off was also just as easy and not a speck of dust was to be seen, and it's also one of the few compounds with an added pleasant scent. Next in line is 3D's 501 Cutting Compound, which incidentally is considerably the most expensive one here so far. But once again, from a user point, it spreads very well, has a long working time with very little dust, at least with the blue H2O pads, though I wouldn't say the wipe off is the easiest one here, but by no means overly bad. Thirdly in this section is MENZERNA 300 Heavy Cut Compound. Now compared to the last two compounds, I'd say it's not quite as user friendly with some dusting, much like the prototype compound in CLEARCUT, but with a decent but not exactly amazing wipe off. So onto the all important results. Now as far as cut and defect removal goes, I was actually quite happy with how both MENZERNA 300 and 3D 501 performed. But Vision, at least on this test, did seem to lack a little in both its cut and finish. I'll also add that all these compounds were tested with microfiber pads as well, and Vision did seem to perform noticeably better on microfiber, though it still came up behind in relation to defect removal compared to the compounds here in this particular test. When it comes to finish and clarity, the winner here by far was the 3D 501 that so far seemed to come in equal second with CLEARCUT, just behind CONCOURS Precision. Quite surprisingly, the worst finish by far compared to all the other compounds used today was MENZERNA 300. That even after playing around with technique and working on some other panels with other pads, I just wasn't able to get anything remotely acceptable in the way of finish. But like I said, the cut was good, so as a first stage of leveling defects, it would still be a viable option. But I'm really trying to test every aspect of every compound here to gather as much information as possible. So after some microfiber pad testing using the Lake Country fiber cutting microfiber pads, the best two results I was able to achieve on those pads was with the Last Cut Compounding Glaze and Polish Angel's Master Compound. Now overall, I'll try to explain that every one of these compounds works with microfiber pads in the way of achieving good correction on the paint. However, when it comes to using microfiber pads with almost all these other compounds, the issues I was faced with was extremely difficult wipe-offs, increased dusting, increased heat, pad clogging, and so on. So the reason the Last Cut and Master Compound were the only two that work well with microfiber is that they consistently kept the paint lubricated, reduced heat, were able to blow out the residue with ease, had minimal to no dusting with easy wipe-offs. And although some of the other compounds were able to tick one or two of these boxes, only the Last Cut and Master Compound were able to tick all of them. Now overall, I would still give a slight edge to Master Compound over the Last Cut from a user-friendly point of view. But when examining the results, there was very little difference in the way of finish and clarity, but an increased leveling ability that could be seen with the Last Cut. As an overall comparison, after a full day of testing and gathering information on these compounds and pads, the best finish and still the only real viable option for a single stage correction on this paint was with the Lake Country Blue H2O foam pad using CONCOURS Precision. The best cutting combination that actually was able to minimally reduce orange peel and provide the best clarity in a two-stage correction process was the Lake Country fiber cutting microfiber pad with the Last Cut Compounding Glaze, which also had one of the best finishes, though it would still require a quick second stage to slightly address some minimal haze, which would then create the best overall finish I was able to produce with all the products and techniques I trialed on this black Audi paint. Now, like I said earlier, what I've shown you is just a fraction of the testing that took place. And even since shooting this video close to a month ago, I continued to use all these products further on some more paint types, pads and polishing machines that I'll hopefully be sharing more of in the up and coming videos. Now there was another quicker process to determine the second stage of polishing or refining the finish, which due to the length of this video I'm just gonna skip to the results. So basically SCHOLL Concepts S30 on the ShineMate red finishing foam pad with just a couple of quick passes, working larger areas, easily dealt with the minor haze and made for a really speedy second stage, purely for the fact that the finish I was getting with the microfiber pad and the last cut was already pretty exceptional. Now I want to quickly use that point to touch on why I do look for clarity of finish in a compound as an important characteristic even when I'm doing a second follow-up stage. Like I said earlier, quite a few of the compounds I tried did produce a great amount of cut or defect removal. But the reason I went with the combination I chose was firstly that on this particular paint type, microfiber just seemed to knock back a little of the orange peel to really get more of a mirror finish that I just wasn't able to see with the foam. But just as important, the last cut was not only able to work far better with microfiber than most other compounds here, but also finish exceptionally well. So what that means is that my second stage becomes such an easy and quick process where so little is needed to produce that perfect finish. Whereas if I'd gone with one of the other compounds where a lot more haze and marring was being left behind on the paint, my second stage would have involved more passes, working smaller sections and taking much longer in that final correction stage. And just lastly, before I get to talking you through the correction process of this car in relation to my method and working techniques, I just want to touch on what is or should be a go-to compound and what are troubleshooting compounds or polishes and why they are important. A go-to compound is and should be a product that time and time again gives you the results you're looking to achieve in a trouble-free and time-efficient manner. So you know that 80 to 90% of the time they just work as they should. For me, I can tell you that since the first time I tried the last cut about 6 months ago, it just simply works on almost every paint type I come across. And I can say the very same thing for Precision. But where the last cut excels on microfiber pads, Precision does the very same thing on foam. So if microfiber just isn't working on a particular paint, I know I have a great foam pad combination with Precision and the blue Lake Country HDO pad. But on the rare occasions that neither of them are working for some reason or another, I know that Master Compound is another great option with microfiber, and that the SCHOLL range of S2 Orange to S20 Black can also do wonders on foam, especially with the SCHOLL Spider pads. So in the end, it's more about working out what you've had success with time and time again and using those compounds and pads as a starting point. But when they just don't work well, having a couple more options that you know have also worked in the past can be a real lifesaver. But also, don't necessarily start with jumping from one compound and pad to another. First try things like working smaller sections, using more or less product, adding pressure or easing off to see what the paint responds best to. And only when technique still isn't working, then move on to trying other compounds and pads. As a general way of working, I like to start with the roof and work my way down and around the vehicle. But I finished the test section on this bonnet here to show you the basic methods used. So personally, I like to start with my mini DA polisher to do what is known as the edge work. So the smaller pad sizes allow you to get up and close and into the edges of a car's panel to not only achieve better correction in those areas, but also safer in relation to removing less paint and avoiding the dreaded clear coat and burn through. Now I'll be checking my work by using Clarity to clean the compounds, oils and paint residue off the panel as I go, and using my handheld defect spotting light to ensure the results I was getting on the test section continue throughout each set of passes. Once the edge work is done, I'll switch to my larger DA polisher, which will obviously be more efficient for those larger flat panel sections. Once the primary stage of cutting is complete on the bonnet, I'm going to follow up with my second and final stage of polishing. Now the big difference between these two stages is really technique and time. With the cutting stage, the bonnet was split into about a dozen sections using both the 3-inch and 5-inch pads, and doing about 5 section passes in each set with moderate pressure applied. Whereas with the finishing stage just needing minimal refinement, the bonnet was split into only 6 sections, just using the 5-inch pad and doing about 3 passes per set, and only light pressure, a faster arm speed, and lower machine speed was needed. Now part of why these are two different techniques is based on what the paint requires. So while more aggression is needed to remove the significant defects, only minimal is needed to remove the compounding haze and micro marring. So while you may think you need to spend more time on the second or final stage, the more you polish beyond what the paint needs simply means you're unnecessarily removing more paint permanently. And just as important, especially on softer paints, the longer you polish, the more likelihood you have of reintroducing scratches back onto the paint due to things like the clear coat building up on the pads, drying out and clumping up your polish, and further softening the paint due to heat build-up caused by longer polishing cycles. Now as far as glass goes, I generally use whatever polish I'm using on the paint to give it a good clean if it's in decent condition. But if it's got defects such as water spots or certain edgings, I'll generally use a microfiber pad with my cutting compound to remove them. And if I'm not applying a coating to the glass, or if I'm using a C-quartz coating, I'll generally use an all-in-one polish primer such as CARPRO Essence or CONCOURS Morph to add some protection. Now if the glass is in a really bad state, I do sometimes also step up to CARPRO Seriglass on their glass polishing rayon pads, but only if needed. Also, this car does have quite a few of what's known as piano black plastic trims. These trims can be polished as well, but you need to understand that they're significantly softer than most paint types you're likely to encounter. So if they aren't too scratched up like the ones on the roof of this car, then just your finishing polish with a finishing pad should be able to address any minor defects. On this occasion, I actually followed up with a second stage using SCHOLL Concepts Finer S40 polish, which cleared up some minor micro marring I was getting with the S30 on these trims. You'll notice throughout this detail that apart from the larger flat panels such as the roof, bonnet and boot, that about 70% of the correction work I'm doing on this car is with my mini 3-inch polisher. The real difference between chasing a higher level of defect removal is all in the finer details, and the only real way to get great correction in those tighter corners, thin edges, sharp curves and valley crevices that most modern cars are filled with is with smaller machines and pads. Now if this wasn't a car I was looking to achieve a higher rate of correction but still produce a great improved result, then I'd definitely be using my larger polisher much more than my smaller ones. So once again, it's all about using your tools and products together with your skill and knowledge to best address your particular needs and situation. Now you saw just before that I used my finishing polishes and pads to correct the piano black plastics on the roof. However, since these piano black plastics on the door pillars are far more scratched up than the ones on the roof, due to using them to shut the doors rather than the door handles, which is unfortunately pretty common, they will need the more aggressive cutting combination to level down those deeper scratches and then follow up with the finishing stage with S40 and the red Shine Mate finishing pad. And the door glass with no real defects unlike the roof will also get a quick polish with the Essence and the red finishing pad. Now apart from those slight variations when addressing different surfaces such as glass and the piano plastic trims, the rest of the detail is pretty much done in the same manner of using the mini polisher to get all the finer edge work done first, and then following up with the larger polisher to correct the flatter panel sections. Now on this particular detail and most of the recent ones I've been doing in the past, I also tend to do both my cutting and finishing stages on each panel before I move on to the next. There's really no right or wrong way in relation to that, as with masking up the whole vehicle at the start or going section by section. I'll also let you know that there was a couple of deeper isolated scratches that had gone right through the clear and a couple more that were pretty close to it. In the end, both the owner and I decided that they weren't worth chasing completely by sanding or removing excess clear coat or applying touch-up paint that, for those particular scratches, just wouldn't look great. So a decision just to improve the scratches to the point that they weren't so noticeable was the best balance we went for, which I think was a great compromise. And just to reinforce the importance of using your IPA white product, or Clarity for me in this instance, it's all about firstly truly assessing your results and not looking at a panel with your lights that has polishing oils and residue hiding and masking the defects. But secondly, and more importantly, is to ensure you're keeping the panel bare and not contaminating it with layer after layer of compound polishing and clear coat residue that'll make it increasingly difficult to remove all that residue with just a final IPA wipe down. So if you can keep on top of it as you go, you'll largely avoid the devastating issues of not having a ceramic or glass coating effectively bond to the paint, or really any paint protection you choose to apply. I've said it before in the past that I do go through a lot of IPA or alcohol-based cleaner, but I can also tell you that I've never had a coating or any paint protection product prematurely fail. And I know you might hear it a lot, but it really does come down to proper and thorough paint preparation that doesn't stop after you wash and decontaminate the car, but follows right through to the point of applying the paint protection. So a final alcohol wipe down with Clarity and a final inspection of the paint, and it was time for applying a coating. So the coating that was used was CONCOURS Nova Pro. This is a professional version of their Evo coating that some of the local viewers may know of. Now I've used this coating quite a bit in the last year, and it really is an exceptional world-class coating that is extremely durable, massively resistant to chemicals, and noticeably increases the depth and saturation of the paint, as well as being about as hydrophobic as a coating gets. It's also layerable and really excels with 2 to 3 layers applied, which I've done in the past and seen the results for myself. But for testing purposes, I'm just going to be adding a single layer to test and monitor how the bare minimum of this coating will hold up and behave down the track. It was actually a seriously hot day when I applied it, so the flash or wipe time was super quick, at less than a minute. but in most other circumstances of using it, the flash time is usually a few minutes and there is a little more leeway before you wipe and level down the excess product. But at close to 40 degrees Celsius, it was more of a wipe on and wipe off procedure. Non-Over Pro, just like most coatings, can be used on all trims, rubbers, plastics and glass as well if you choose to. It really is a nice and quite basic coating application procedure. And if you're layering it, you should start your second layer straight after you finish the first, and the third layer straight after the second. But on such a hot day, like the one when I was applying it, you need to adapt to the environment and understand that it will begin to cure far more rapidly. So it'd be far better to do half the car and then layer your second and third coats. And then do the second half of the car, again layering your second and third coats if you wish to. I'll also let you know that the rims are coated with CONCOURS Pyro wheel coating, and I'll hopefully have a video update on the car soon that gives you a look at it during a maintenance wash down the track. I'll leave you with the final footage and images of the finished product, and I do really hope you guys found this somewhat epic long video useful and interesting to watch. For those of you who made it all the way through, a special thanks goes out. As always, thanks for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe to show your support for this channel, and I'll see you in the next video.